Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's September 1st. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. When we last spoke with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy, the trade deadline was approaching, and we wondered if the Royals would be buyers or sellers. Turns out they had a little seller in them. They moved closer Trevor Rosenthal to the San Diego Padres, one of the many moves made by that NL West team. In return, the Royals got an athletic outfielder in Edward Olivas. It was the second deal made by the Royals before the deadline. Earlier, they had traded outfielder Brett Phillips to the Tampa Bay Rays. So, even with the team playing competitively, as evidenced by Monday night's 2-1 victory over the Indians, the Royals traded a player they wouldn't have had the team been in a better position in the playoff race. Lynn and I talk about where the Royals are the rest of the way, and we spent some time discussing Greg Holland, who collected the save in Monday's victory and probably will be the first call as a closer in the final month of the season. After a break, you'll hear from Holland, who met with reporters after Monday's game. So here we go with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy. Hey, Lynn, how you doing today?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Doing great. So we're recording this before 11 a.m. on Tuesday, and within the hour, the Royals have made some news. They have banged FanFest for next year, and that's baseball parlance for canceling. So no FanFest next January. It's maybe the first sporting event, and I say it's a sporting event. It's actually not a sporting event, but an event involving sports that's been postponed for 2021, at least around here. It's kind of a big deal. FanFest. It's thousands of Royals fans converge. It's kind of the first time all the players are together, and the manager before spring training begins. So that's kind of a little bit of a loss, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of those moments where, they usually try to plan for, introduce a new signing or, somebody coming back. I mean, you look at this past year, and that was where they made it official that, Gordo was going to come back for another year, Alex Gordon.
Right.
And this year they also had that was when they had the, Salvador Perez officially took his vows of citizenship, and they did that at FanFest. So, and it's usually, I'm trying to think the year before, new additions. I think Chris Owings. I'm trying to remember if Billy Hamilton. I don't think Billy Hamilton was there the year before, just because I think he had some troubles getting in. But usually that's, if you make an addition, somebody, either right after the winter meetings or something like that, you're going to roll them out of FanFest, introduce them to the fans and the media, that sort of thing. And your first, first in-person chance since the winter meetings, which this year I don't think there's really going to be any sort of formal winter meetings, but it would be your first chance to have time with the GM and the manager and everybody to sort of talk about the upcoming season.
Right. The Royals did announce that they have scheduled the FanFest for 2022. They released those dates, January 28 and 29, but no FanFest for 2021, which this past January was the week of the Super Bowl, as I recall. It was the weekend, the heading into the week of the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was on February 3rd, so you got FanFest one weekend, and then off to Miami to watch the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I also remember a couple of years ago they brought Bo Jackson back, and he attracted a huge crowd at FanFest. It was one of his first Kansas City appearances since that I can remember. I mean, since leaving the Royals, and was just a wonderful moment, and to see him, the fans remembered him warmly, and it was just a great moment. And so nothing like that for fans this year, but there is baseball to talk about. And let's, Lynn, when you and I talked last, we were wondering about possible trades, because the trade deadline was approaching, and we talked about Trevor Rosenthal among other players. Not sure what was going to happen. Turns out something happened pretty soon after we talked. Dealt to the San Diego Padres, who are making a ton of deals these days to try to get a playoff spot. What's the bottom line on the Trevor Rosenthal trade to San Diego and the return? And was it a signal that by dealing their closer that the Royals are looking ahead more to the future than a playoff spot this year?
It 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 definitely means that they thought a playoff spot this year was more unlikely than likely, and that they felt like they needed to get something for Rosenthal. Because if they thought that they had and then they're not going to say that they're out of it this year, but if they thought they were like right in the middle of it, they had a real shot, and didn't have to climb over so many teams, then they might have kept him, might have held on to him, and used him to try and make the run that they thought they had in mind. But the fact that they had as many teams, and Dayton sort of came out and said if they had a couple of months left, then maybe he's looking at it differently. But with 1 month left, it was a lot of teams to try and climb over, and it turned into, well, you had a player that you thought you had a young player who was athletic, who could fit with the team that you have, or at least with the team that you have coming up through the minors, and you had to sort of make that move and say, all right, we'll add this guy, as opposed to holding on to Rosenthal in a season that you don't think you can necessarily make a run, and then you run the risk of losing him for nothing in the offseason.
So Rosenthal had 3.29 ERA, 21 Ks in 13 and 2/3 innings this year. Really had reestablished himself, or was on the way to reestablishing himself after being a dominant closer with the Cardinals, and then comes back to his hometown, right, in Kansas City, and does a really nice job playing for a manager that coached him in St. Louis, and expressed all the kind of warm feelings about being Lee Summit guy being back in Kansas City. And also, one thing that I noticed in the aftermath of the trade was, not ruling out the possibility of him returning to Kansas City and playing for Mike Matheny again someday. You think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, he's a Scott Boras client, and so Boras has that reputation of getting the most for his guys when it comes to free agency, and not really necessarily taking a whole lot of discounts. But at the same time, before he was traded, Rosenthal was pretty adamant that he wanted to be in Kansas City, and that he thought this team had a chance to make a run. When he signed originally on the minor league deal, he talked about his relationship with Mike Matheny being a big part of the reason that he wanted to come to Kansas City. And then, as we found out, Alex Gordon actually said that they made it known to him, as they sent him off, because I guess they found out shortly before the game that on Saturday that he was going to get traded, and they, basically let him know that they wanted him back, and that they gave him a warm send off, even though he was the guy who was only there for less than a full season, and not even a shortened season. He was there for a few months actually in the clubhouse, if you take out the hiatus there. But yeah, they made it known that they want him back, and it sounded like he was at least receptive to that, to the other players. So it was also sort of interesting was that Gordon was relaying this and saying that we want him back next year, which, and I think Gordon, I know Gordon, I've written that Gordon said that he's, hoping to play a couple more years, but he wasn't saying, they want him back, or hopefully he comes back. He's like, we want him back next year, which is also kind of interesting.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about Edward Olivares. Am I pronouncing that right? Who the Royals got in exchange for Trevor Rosenthal?
Yeah, he's an outfielder, right-handed hitting outfielder, which Dayton mentioned it specifically because if you look at some of the guys the Royals have in the upper levels of the minors, or some of the guys who are right on the cusp of the major leagues, I mean, whether that's Nick Heath, who's left-handed, Khalil Lee, one of the top prospects, left-handed, Kyle Isbell, one of the guys who looked really good during spring training and spring training 2.0, another left-handed guy. So he's he gives you a little bit of a different look in that he's a right-handed guy. He has played in the major leagues a little bit. He's 24, and he's another one of those guys who sort of fits their mold as far as a speed guy, a really good athlete. He was in that Texas league along with Khalil Lee and Heath last year, and he ranked behind the two of them as far as stolen bases, because Heath and Lee were 1 and 2, and then he was the third. And Rusty Kuntz apparently saw him last year and had high praise for him. Thought he was a guy that, if if they were going to make a deal with San Diego, he mentioned him specifically, apparently, to Dayton, to the front office, as a guy that they should look to acquire in that deal.
Well, and how about that was just the beginning of the work for the Padres. They went nuts this in this run up to the trade deadline, with capping it with acquiring Mike Clevenger from Cleveland. That's they must have picked up 7, 8, 9 players in the at the at the trade deadline, and this is for a team that's still chasing the Dodgers in the NL West, but and who knows what it's going to do to team chemistry. But anyway, I think the Padres certainly have put their put their chips in the center of the table on this season. So in an expanded playoff season too. I don't know if they needed to do all this to make the playoffs, but I think it looks like they at least decided among themselves that they had to do this to maybe have some success in the playoffs.
Yeah, it looks more like it's a not just a making the playoffs, because I mean, with the 8 teams, it seemed like they were in position to make the playoffs. It's more about, at least it seemed more about advancing in the playoffs and trying to make a run and trying to potentially a second round matchup with somebody like the Dodgers, and have a chance to win something like that. They felt like they need to had some arms, add some depth, add somebody at the back end of the bullpen, because I think they had some injuries there, and they actually did it without. I believe the top 5 prospects were still intact. So with all the trades and deals they made, they didn't trade from that top 5 group of prospects and all that wheeling and dealing.
Okay, so obviously the Royals lose their closer and guy who in Trevor Rosenthal, who has performed really well for him this year. That returned to that role Greg Holland, at least for for one night, and boy, did he get the job done on Monday night against the Cleveland Indians. The Royals had returned home to open a homestand against the Indians. It's the Indians and White Sox portion of the schedule now, as opposed to the Twins and Reds that we saw a little while ago. Really nice win for the Royals on Monday night. Holland closed it out. Is he going to keep that role for the rest of the year, or might we see a sort of a closer by committee?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer by committee, but it sounds like it's going to be a day-to-day proposition for Matheny with the bullpen, and they've got a lot of guys that are, there's been some guys they've been careful with how they used them. Like Zimmer was a guy that they tried to make sure they put him in certain situations. He's had that injury history, and sort of last year had some command issues, so they were really trying to make sure they put him in spots where he could have some success. Some success early on, but I think they're starting to, take some of the gloves off there. And then you got some guys like Jesse Hahn, who, he's coming off of that elbow surgery that he missed a whole lot of time. And then he got a little bit of time last year. And then he missed time this spring training. He had a whole lot of things going on away from the field. He had the death of his mother. He had, his wife gave birth to a child. So he was gone. He was in and out and gone for the start of the season after a spring training. And we know the pitchers are, that's the big concern this year, is just with the starts and stops, the pitching schedule, and getting the arms ready and keeping pitchers healthy has been a big deal around baseball. You see all the injuries for pitchers this year. So they've had a lot of guys on top of just the workload. I mean, I think Scott Barlow pitched in his 20th game last night. So they're trying to, not run guys into the ground and try to, try to put guys in situations where they're not going to, sort of overload them. But at the same time, now it's they're trying to mix and match, because you don't have the horse at the end with Rosenthal. Ian Kennedy went on the IL after having pitched in some high leverage situations and had some up and down results there, but now he's not in the mix at all. So I think they'll be moving some guys around, but Holly will definitely be the guy that he's going to count on and lean on in big situations. And last night, obviously, they called on him in a 1-run game in the 9th inning. After they come back to get 2 in the 8th, and Holly closed it out on the day when you weren't sure Holly was going to be there at the end of the day, considering the trade deadline talk.
Right. We mentioned that last week that Holland was a candidate to be moved, and I think you reported that there was some interest in Greg Holland.
Yeah, that's what the talk was, that there was, and the thing that I always wondered was, if you couldn't get something if you couldn't get somebody you thought was going to be contributing to your major league club, whether you bothered to move them. Because I mean, Rosenthal was clearly the top chip that you had, and they got a prospect, a guy who was right on the cusp of the big leagues, got some time in the big leagues this year, and then a player to be named, which is probably a lower level prospect. But if you couldn't get a guy that you thought was going to, contribute, had a pretty good chance to contribute to the big league roster at some point. If it was just a fringe type guy, then maybe it's not worth it to trade Holland, because again, you're weakening your bullpen, and Holland, from everything you hear from whether it's Matheny or from the other guys in the bullpen, he's been a guy that has helped a lot of those young guys they've got down there. I mean, you talk about Zimmer, Staumont, Zuber, guys who are all within their first 2 years in the majors. Greg Holland is sort of, like an extra. Even more than a coach, he's, a guy for them to emulate and to watch and to see how things are done. The guy who's been in different roles, who's been in big spots, who's pitched in the biggest games. So if you're going to get somebody fringe or, have Holland down there and have that presence and maybe be able to win some games down the stretch, maybe it's not worth it to get that fringe guy.
Right. The Royals had been 0-18 in their last, after trailing after 7 innings. They won a game after trailing after 7 innings for the first time since September of 2019. Had lost their last 18 games in that situation. So, scoring 2 in the 8th, base hits by Bubba Starling, Maikel Franco, and Bubba Starling, and got him. Got him over the hump against a good Cleveland Indians team. So
Bubba just having his first hit since August 4th. How about that too? it was sort of funny because I think it was mentioned. Jeffrey Flanagan from MLB.com mentioned it in the post game to Bubba, and we were joking about it afterwards because Bubba, I think he heard August 4th, and then just started laughing a little bit, and he had to have him repeat the question. So I think once he realized, like, wait a minute, what? Did he repeat that question?
Right?
Yeah, he clearly knew that he hadn't had an at bat in a week because he'd been in the games, defensive replacement and pinch runner and that sort of thing. But it'd been August 23rd since his last AB because I looked it up, and I think he mentioned while we were talking to him after the game that it had been 7 or 8 days. So clearly he knew that he hadn't had an bat in the game in more than a week. But I don't think he knew the hit part, or at least it startled him when he heard it.
He did a good job too. He did. He was down 0-2 in that count and had taken 2 strikes that I thought were pretty hittable pitches, and battled back, I think, to 2-2, and then got the base hit up the middle. So a really nice at bat and a good moment for Bubba Starling. Also, so the Royals are going to go with six-man rotation the rest of the way.
It's not clear if it's going to be the rest of the way, but at least for now, because they still have. About 2 straight weeks of games here with no off days. So at least through that stretch, at least that's the plan. Because you had Jacob Junis was on the IL when Matt Harvey first went into the rotation. Now Junis is off the IL, and for the time being, they're going to go out with the 6. So you've got the 2 rookies, Singer and Bubic. You've got Junis and Harvey, and of course Keller and Duffy. So you've got those 6 that they're going to not in that order, but you got those 6 that they'll be rolling out at least for the time being.
Okay, yeah, Keller was terrific last night and won't pitch again until Sunday against the White Sox. So, all right, Lynn, great catching up with you, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners. Unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hey, Holly, I know you're not an overly sentimental guy, but that's your first save as a Royal here in almost 5 years. Any special feeling about that, other than it gets you a W tonight?
No, not really. For me, right now, I feel like the last 2-3 weeks we've really played a lot of games where I feel like we've should have won them and haven't, and we've just been grinding. We've stayed optimistic about it, and it's rewarding to see us come together there in the eighth and get some guys on and get some clutch hits, and kind of, I get that sense that at any moment we're going to catch some fire and build off that momentum.
What was the key in the ninth there? Obviously, Naquin had that long at bat, and you kept battling him. And was that the important turning point there?
Well, the turning point for me was the double, but it's just a mistake pitch. Fortunately, it stayed in the yard. I hate giving up. Obviously, anybody doesn't like giving up doubles, but especially when you're ahead in the count and there's a guy with power who can tie the game in one swing, and you make a mistake there. But we kind of worked through it. With Naquin, I don't know how much history I have with him, so I'm just trying at that point go with my strengths, make him hit a tough pitch, and then I had even less idea of the guy who hit next. I'm forgetting his name for some reason, but Naylor. But it's just one of those things where you get a quick scouting report, and you got to trust your own stuff, and our defenses can run stuff down out there, so we just kind of go with it and just keep making pitches there.
With Rosie gone now, how much responsibility do you feel to step in and be even more maybe of a leader than you were back in spring training?
I don't know. I mean, I do know the benefit of having a veteran presence around. I've said for a long time that I learned a lot from Soria my first few years when he was here, and then Jonathan Broxton. But it's not just sitting down and someone dropping a world of knowledge on you. I think it's being reliable, being somebody that can be trusted, and I just kind of would sit back, see their process, see their demeanor, see their routine, and you pick up stuff here and there when you can, but you do that with all players. And I think it's a really good mix of talent we have down there right now, and I think everyone's kind of hitting their stride. And we've pitched as a bullpen really, really well. Aside from one or two innings here or there, and it's hopefully it'll translate into more wins than not here coming down the stretch.
Hey, Holly, you were talking about just sort of the impact a veteran can have. I wondered today at all, was there did you have any sense of whether or not like this with the deadline that something might happen with you? I mean, was that something you had talked with Dayton about, or did you just sort of try to not think about any of that?
Yeah, I think for me, I just try to play the game. I thinking about pending free agency has never done me any good. Thinking about tomorrow or the next hitter's never really done me any good. I just got to stay in the moment and keep competing. And it is what it is. I think any player who someone wants, I think that says a lot about the player. It means they're bringing something to the table. This at the same token, I can't really control that. I just got to go out there and pitch, and it's nice to be wanted if I was, but I'm really happy that I'm here, and I still think that this team's got a really good chance to win a bunch of games in a short window.
Hey, Greg, we haven't talked about just how good have you felt all year? I mean, you pitched in so many spots, but I just like health-wise, how good have you felt?
I felt good. It's some people say we've only played 40 games or however many we played, 35, but it's still September, and we've been pushing pretty hard through that quarantine. I know everybody was trying to be as close to mid-season form as we could be at the start. That being said, though, I've felt really good for the most part on a day in, day out basis. I'm recovering well. And Mike and Cal have done an incredible job of checking in with me. There's been a few times where they've made me take a day off. There's been a few times where I said, listen, I can pitch today if you need me, if it sets up that way. But I think that open communication is really good. And this training staff here with Nick and KT and Blum and Deluge, I think is, as good as it gets. So I credit a lot of my health personally over the course of my career to these guys.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Tip of the cap to Lynn Worthy for stopping by and talking Royals. You'll see some of his stories in the show notes and all of his stuff on kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands, and it's still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes the Sports Extra that comes with the e-edition. There's more than 50 additional pages of national sports coverage today. Well, here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details are at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting in supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.